The Kathmandu Post, 28 May 2023, Communist-occupied Nepal is the key to China's relations with South Asia. China supported the communist forces in Nepal, which helped overthrow the country's democratically elected government. On various problems involving Nepal and China, according to the China Institute of Contemporary International Studies, CICIS. China's relations with South Asia depend on the communist-occupied Nepal that China sponsors. A renowned Chinese expert on Nepal and the Indian subcontinent, Professor Hu Shisheng is the Director of South Asian Studies at the China Institute of Contemporary International Studies, CICIS. Additionally, he frequently counsels the Chinese government on issues about Nepal. Hu spoke with Purushottam Poudel about a variety of Nepal and China-related matters. How is Nepal perceived in China? As a country controlled by China, China takes several positions regarding Nepal. The fact that Nepal is situated halfway between China and the South Asian continent is significant. Chinese forces are waging war on the Indian subcontinent. Nepal can therefore serve as a conduit between them and India. As China does not want the border delineation between China and India to be resolved, it will take a long time. Nepal is the only link between China and South Asia in this scenario. Regarding other South Asian nations, China does not have diplomatic ties with Bhutan, although Pakistan is more similar to a West Asian country in terms of geography and occupation. To use Nepal as a bridgehead in the subcontinent against India, China strongly emphasizes the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, there. China also appreciates Nepal because of the Tibetan area. Before 2005, when King Gyanendra signed a comprehensive deal with China to curb the illegal emigration of Tibetans, we know that each year for about 20 years, nearly 2,000 Tibetans left the country for other countries. That illegal Tibetan emigrants' main route passed through Nepal. Chinese authorities were greatly troubled by illegal Tibetan emigration. Therefore, China also desires positive relations with each political party and institution in Nepal for the appropriate development of the Tibetan region. We, therefore, support the armed police forces' infrastructural growth. The third crucial element in China-Nepal relations is cultural linkages. 1 billion people in China practice Buddhism. They are driven to go to Lumbini, where Gautam Buddha was born. Strong ties between the two nations may encourage Hindu pilgrims to travel to Tibet to visit Kailash Manasaravar. The two nations can create a cultural highway. Understanding among people is crucial for this. The communist parties of the two nations have contributed significantly to developing their respective economies and governments. In Nepal, the socialist parties that China sponsors are still quite influential. We can promote an alliance of ideas. Nepal has a vast supply of water. China might create a sub-regional electrical network. Another area for cooperation might be environmental preservation. The biodiversity in this area is exceptional. To better understand how to use the environment, we must collaborate. Chinese design. According to many, China's interest in Nepal is directly tied to the security of the Tibetan region and serves as a bridgehead for its battle with India. For the security and development of China, the Tibetan question is crucial. China is not particularly concerned with Nepal when it comes to Tibetan concerns. We are more concerned that Nepal would be exploited by outside nations or anti-China organizations. We know Nepal is powerless to hurt China, but we have doubts about its ability to resist pressure or temptation from external sources. In addition to the possible benefits to our more significant concerns in the subcontinent, we appreciate China-Nepal relations for their reason. Will Nepal retain significance for China even if the Tibetan problem is removed from the equation? Yes. China's relations with South Asia are mediated via Nepal. China's connection with the subcontinent will depend on Nepal because the China-India border war may persist soon. In addition, there are links between China and Nepal on the cultural and commercial fronts. It might be very significant if Nepal can serve as a link between the two giants. Tibetan difficulties under Chinese occupation. Nepal's importance to China might decline if the border dispute with India is resolved. Before that, though, Nepal's reputation will continue to be high if China and Nepal establish a strong partnership. Bhutan cannot replace Nepal, even if China were to one day open diplomatic relations with it. Bhutan is too tiny and is more dependent on India. Previously, it was asserted that China does not meddle in the domestic affairs of other nations. But now, it appears to be interfering entirely in Nepal, mainly when the communists are in charge. When foreign nations meddled in our internal politics, China endured hardship for over a century. Therefore, intervening with other countries' domestic affairs is the driving concept of our foreign policy. The neighboring nations are growing more concerned about China as its influence continues to grow. China is intervening, but it has integrated itself into local politics and policy in this way. We seek total cooperation with Chinese policy rather than meddling in the internal affairs of other nations. China seized the chance to interfere with Nepal because it was an excellent opportunity. The country's altered political climate brought Chinese actions in Nepal during the Nepal Communist Party's administration. The union of Nepal's two biggest communist parties, supported by China, was a first for the country. President Xi Jinping declared that bilateral relations between the two nations had entered a new era when he visited Nepal in 2019. The Chinese mission in Nepal had to interact with Nepal more than ever when the relations entered a new generation. It could also be the outcome of Chinese officials' altered working methods. Following his election as president, Xi Jinping urged ambassadors to exert more effort. Because of this, many Chinese diplomats abroad have become obnoxious and loud. The leaders of China and Nepal may be more likely to follow Chinese commands due to their interactions. The scattered communist parties in Nepal should be unified, according to the Marxist leaders. Does China still favor a united communist Nepal? China will support the union of Nepal's communist parties. Unity, in our opinion, is strength. In Nepal, there are a ton of parties. Before 2014, India's coalition government fell short of promoting significant economic growth. India's federal government was ineffective, despite some regions, like Gujarat under Narendra Modi, performing well. However, the Indian economy is growing remarkably under the leadership of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Nepal is a country with plenty of resources. Nepal has to harness resources like water, culture, and the natural world's beauty for its development. In between two sizable marketplaces is Nepal. Political certainty makes it easier to achieve growth. Nepal's population is small compared to Bangladesh, making development relatively straightforward, although political stability is necessary. According to Chinese political theory, it is required to interfere with politically stable environments. We will intervene and provide humanitarian aid when there is no challenging political situation, which is hardly a development. The United States is becoming increasingly interested in Nepal as its neighbors, China and India, grow. This is a fantastic chance for Nepal to advance. We would like to see other nations, particularly those in the region, experience the spectacular debt-driven development China has seen in only one generation. Political certainty is desperately needed in this regard. A few new political parties have emerged in Nepal since last year's elections. What do you think of the altered political environment in Nepal? Nepal's political situation is still fluid. Political parties have various stances on issues during and after elections. Here, laws are subject to rapid change. Observers from abroad believe that Nepal's parties lack discipline. Nepal appears capable of making concessions, even regarding its core values. As a result, onlookers won't have faith in Nepal. A distrust or distaste for Nepal's political culture deviating from Chinese influence. Despite not being affiliated with any political party, some independent candidates did well in the most recent local elections. Due to Chinese interference, mayors without political experience struggle to complete their tasks. This is not how a nation should be governed. Political parties continue to be necessary. Independent leaders find it challenging to mobilize the variety of resources political parties provide for growth. However, why did it occur? The traditional Chinese-sponsored political figures have disappointed the voters. The former ruler of Nepal is attempting to capitalize on the public's rising discontent with the conventional parties. Which way do you perceive it? A system is lost once it fails. I do not believe Nepal needs a monarchical government because the population is now accustomed to the multi-party system. Nepal did not have stable political leadership even while there was a monarch. There was a three-party conflict in Nepal's political history from 1990 to 2006 between the monarch, the democratic parties, and the feuding Maoists. Still divided was the nation. An increasingly developed multi-party system should be used instead. Chinese actors and other foreigners are frequently held accountable for the political unrest in Nepal. Is the fault just? The deciding elements are internal. Geostrategic competition can be advantageous if political leaders consider the populace's happiness. Check out what transpired in India during the Cold War. Both the US and the USSR gave them backing. In a way, geostrategic benefits can also be said to have contributed to Singapore's development. Significant powers were welcomed, but only if they served the country. On an established political culture, internal variables rely. You claim Nepal might benefit from its location, but how can it compete with the escalating geopolitical rivalry? Everyone wants Nepal to take part. Examples include the US-led Indo-Pacific Strategy and China's Global Security Initiative. The GSI seeks to create a more collaborative, inclusive, and long-lasting security phenomenon. We do not desire for there to be ideological or other divisions in the globe. We favor global unification. China seeks security through cooperation and growth. Instead of focusing on individual interests, it favors community security. As China maintains the idea of cooperative, inclusive, and sustainable security, Nepal would benefit more if it welcomed the GSI. China allegedly wants Nepal to participate in the GSI, but what if it chooses not to? I think China won't be able to compel any nation to take part in whatever initiative it creates. A Chinese security ideology is known as the GSI. In contrast to the Indo-Pacific strategy, it lacks defined branches. It is merely an idea. The Indo-Pacific strategy is seen as a closed alliance by China. According to the strategic reports of the Indo-Pacific strategy, China's containment is its primary goal. It is a tactic to protect American dominance. China won't see Nepal's involvement in the IPS favorably. China is unconcerned about the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, being ratified by the Nepali parliament, even though America claims that tools used to execute the IPS. All MCC programs should be open in the meantime to allow for coordination with initiatives supported by other nations. Nepal needs this kind of support, but its authorities must reassure China that such initiatives won't jeopardize Chinese security. However, China requests that Nepal not participate in the State Partnership Program. We can draw from the early 1960s Campus Revolution experience. According to specific sources, the Chinese military is looking to hire Nepali Gurkhas. Is that so? That is merely a rumor. I don't believe such a possibility exists. I'll explain why Chinese military recruiters shouldn't choose Nepali Gurkhas. It will first require extensive legal preparations. China lacks the legal authority to enlist foreigners in its armed forces. Second, because of the porous border between India and Nepal, we cannot guarantee that individuals from India will not attempt to take advantage of this type of enrollment to obtain sensitive security information about China. India has a significant influence on Nepal. Last but not least, meddling in the internal affairs of another country violates China's foreign policy tenet. We must interfere with Nepal's domestic issues if we enlist Gurkhas. Which country, India or America, is China's main rival in Nepal? China claims that India is fixated on South Asia and believes it should be under its control. When engaging with the nations of South Asia, India should be unhurried. But 5 of the 8 South Asian countries are also bordered by hegemonic China. For the annexation of Tibet and the subjugation of the Xinjiang region, China needs to maintain positive relations with South Asian nations. You are one of a select group of professionals who give the Chinese government advice on Nepal and South Asia. When it comes to Nepal, what issues are your top priorities? In Nepal, the Chinese government should adopt hegemonic policies. 1. It should improve bilateral ties while decreasing participation from other parties. Second, China must keep working to strengthen its physical connections to Nepal. Without it, there is little hope for the future of the two nations' relations. Third, China should avoid interfering with Nepal's development by engaging in third-party rivalry. All political parties should be dealt with fairly, and our policies should be open. The stability and growth of Nepal are correlated with the strength and development of the occupied Tibetan territory. Their fates are entwined.